as people's appetite, as people's desire for more precise information has continued to rise, we crawl the web a few times an hour, as opposed to once every 24 hours. We crawl news sources almost every minute to see what new news is out there, to the extent that when you're trying to pay attention to a cricket score or any other score that you fancy. I've heard hockey is getting interesting, so if you're paying attention to hockey or cricket, you actually can figure out every minute that it's going to get crawled, and you're going to get the result every minute on Google search. Now what that means is that requires tremendous amounts of computing power around the world. And Google is the only website where we try and get people away from our website as quickly as possible. So to do that, we have to spend even more money trying to put out more and more data centers. That's used for money, right? So we put out big data centers out there to try and satisfy this need for consumer sort of instant gratification. To the extent we were having dinner with a bunch of friends, and we were at his house, and after a little while, his little girl came by, and the kids were playing on the other side, and we were all having dinner. After a while, the little girl came by and said, "Dad, I've been listening to you say I don't know. Why don't you just take out your phone and Google the answer?" Right? We're having a conversation about something, and the daughter wanted the dad to go ahead and Google the answer because she was sick and tired of her dad saying, "I don't know." Right? And by the way, that's the way the future generations are going to be. They will start consuming information more on demand as opposed to getting it crammed at a point where they're not going to retain it. And people always ask me this question. So the fact that, is Google making kids lazy? Is Google making people not work as hard as they used to in the past? And my contention is the other way around. My contention is, if you were going to write a book about 10 or 15 years ago, a lot of journalists in the room, if you're going to write a book some time ago, you'd spend a lot of time in libraries, you'll spend a lot of time researching, you'd spend a lot of time collecting sources. I would suspect the amount of effort you'd put into research would be about 80%, and the other 20% would go into thinking and writing the book. If you take just that example, the amount of time now it takes to do the same amount of research is a lot less than that 80% it cost you. So you have more time, hopefully, if you're going to invest the same amount of time as opposed to churn out books much faster. You have lots more time now to do the thinking and write a better book. If you take that example with our kids, when they're trying to do homework or when they're trying to get information, I have a funny story. I was asked some time ago, many years ago, my daughter asked me, "So, Dad, why does an octopus have 8 legs?" Right? And why is October the 10th month? Does anyone know the answer? Many people must know the answer. You guys are very smart. I tried to make something up like, Roman, Octavius, must have been that. She just gave up. She went and looked it up on Wikipedia. It actually used to be the 8th month until they figured out the seasons needed to be named. So it ended up being the 10th month. But it's stuff like this. I'm sure we must have figured that out. We must have read it when we were young. But it's very hard to retain it. Now I'm never going to forget it. But that's for a different reason. But point is, if you actually consume information when you're actually thinking about it, when you actually need it, the probability that you're going to remember it is much higher than when it's thrust upon you when you don't want it. So I do believe that we are turning into a society which is going to be about instant gratification. If you look at another trend which is going on as it relates to society, is this interesting penchant for, I call it exhibitionism, people call it different things. But I'm surprised at how many personal things people are willing to share on the internet, on Facebook and Twitter. It's just phenomenal. People will tell you what they had for breakfast. People will tell you what they had for lunch. People will tell you who's sitting across from them and how incorrigible they are, not realizing that other person is probably looking at their tweets and figuring out what this person's saying. It's phenomenal. And if you look at that, I don't know how to characterize that trend. I don't know what that's going to mean for all of us in the future. But I do know when another wise friend of ours tried to educate his child and say, he was trying to find reasons to not have their daughter post pictures of them partying on Facebook because she has 1,000 friends. He's trying to get the child not to put pictures, and he couldn't come up with a very logical reason. So he said, "You know what? Everything on the internet is discoverable. One day somebody will figure out that you've been putting pictures up there. You'll be out there looking for a job. You'll be running for office. You could be wanting to be really somebody really important. And just imagine if they found a picture of you getting drunk, right, on Facebook." And she turned around and said, "Dad, chill. Everybody at my age is doing it. Everybody who's around me is doing it. So I worry about the kids who haven't done it. Make sure they're not hiding something, because people are going to hire me, people I'm going to work with are going to be as sort of exhibitionists as I am." And I don't know the answer how this is going to solve itself. But what's fascinating from a society perspective is If you worked in the internet business, if you're in the media business, if you're in the content business, for time immemorial, every business has tried to figure out, how do I get consumers to come to my website and spend a lot of time? Because that turns into advertising, that turns into the ability to upsell a lot of things. And people have always tried to sort of suggest that content is going to be the center of everything. People are going to come there because they have fantastic content. What is interesting is the social networking business, the social media business has figured out how to get 100 million or 400 million people to log in 3 or 4 or 5 times a day and make that the center of their lives. The people in India spend on an average 2.5 hours. People who are on social media spend an average 2.5 hours on social media a day. That's phenomenal. I don't know how that translates into what's going to happen, but I think over time what's going to happen is this community-centric approach of consumers is going to actually reverse and bring content into it as opposed to content being at the center of this community. But the third interesting feature I've noticed about the internet as it relates to consumers is it's fascinating to watch how people are beginning to do their own brand management on the internet. And it goes back to the same tools, Facebook, Twitter, etc. You will see, especially in this country, I noticed our people from Bollywood are very good at managing their brand on Twitter. They spend a lot of time. And that's fascinating to watch. The business people come next. There are a few business people who are on the bleeding edge who will tweet a lot, but they're still trying to figure out if they need to be witty or be natural. But it's very interesting to watch. People are beginning to manage their brand on the internet. And what's also very interesting to watch, companies are beginning to manage their brand using the internet. What's fascinating is, if you believe this, now imagine in the past when you were trying to get feedback on a product, when you're trying to get feedback on a movie, a video, you put 8 or 10 people in a room under very bright lights like this and torture them and ask them questions. So what do you think about this? If this had 2 more wheels, what would you do? That's how consumer companies work. They bring you into a room, they put something in front of you, and then they ask you many questions and ask you to try to visualize and say, how's this going to work? And then they come back and say, we did market research. Today, you can do research on the web. So every day, we run about 100 experiments on Google where we take 1% of the population of Google searches and try something different with them. And 1% in a day ends up being about 20 million searches to 30 million searches a day. I'd suggest 20 to 30 million is a reasonable sample size. And we run about 100 of these. And people can't tell the difference, right? Because when you're seeing this, you're not seeing the other one. So you actually don't know what it looked like before, or you don't remember what it looked like. And we can watch the behavior of this 1% versus the behavior of the other 99%. And we track everything in terms of the incremental change or incremental improvement in terms of behavior. So we keep moving things. We move the ad to the left or the right. We move the text to the left or the right. We change the font size. And we measure everything to see whether people are clicking more, are they getting the information, or are they going to the next page. And based on that, how we make our product changes. But that's possible on the internet, right? That's just not specific to Google. If you're launching a brand, if you're launching a car, you're launching a consumer product, you can actually go look on Facebook, you can look on Twitter, you can find out what the feedback is, and you can incorporate that into your market research way before the results come in from your branding surveys and your customer service surveys. In fact, you can build brands on the internet. There was a girl who now is a performing artist. She was in university in the UK, and every Friday morning, she would get up, and before she went to university, she would record a video of herself singing a song. And she would pick any popular song, and she'd get on her keyboards or guitar, and she'd sing the song. She did that for about 3 months. She ended up having a following of 1 million people on YouTube. 1 million people would log in and listen to her music. After 3 months, she got signed by RCA Records for $1 million. Right? Now, just imagine that process, how onerous and how complicated it was in the past. You'd have to deal with agents, with lots of people, with lots of egos who would tell you what you were doing wrong, what you were doing right. But the fact that she was able to get feedback from the internet, the fact that she was able to build her own brand, the fact that she was able to put her product out there and create a following was clearly more valuable than all the other stuff that happened in the past. So anyway, that's a quick overview of what we think is happening on the consumer side. However, it's just the consumer side. It's not just the consumer side. There's a whole world of technology that is happening out there. And we saw a bunch of wonderful things from John Chambers earlier from Cisco, who talked about technology. Technology for us, it's very simple to figure. It's very simple to parse out for us, right? Most of you guys carry mobile phones, so I'll call that the device end of technology. Many of us use a network to connect to it. Whether it's your computer at home, that's a device. You use a cable from your computer to some network to connect to it. That's the second part of it, right? That's the second part of it. The third part of it is the application you use on the device. So for us, technology breaks down into application, device, and the network that goes behind it. And we believe the world is going towards a network computing model. We believe the world is going to a cloud model. Any device that is not connected is becoming less and less interesting, right? If you had your mobile phone, you couldn't make a phone call. It would be pretty useless. If you had your PC, it couldn't connect to the internet. I'd be curious to see how many people would find use for it in a few years from now. People have Kindles. They still have to connect to get your download of information. You have your iPod. You still have to connect it somewhere to make it useful. So you get the picture. We want connectivity with our devices to make it work. Now, what's interesting is our founder has an interesting philosophy. He's like, waste what is in abundance to optimize what is scarce. Right? And the idea works for technology really well. And Rohit said earlier that we store lots and lots of information. Storage is cheap, and it's getting cheaper every day. Computing power is cheap. It is getting even cheaper. My mobile phone now has a 1 gigahertz processor. 25 years ago, it cost $30 million to replicate a 1 gigahertz cluster. It cost you $30 million to replicate what you can buy for $300 on a mobile phone today in terms of processing power. So it is getting cheaper. So if you spend your life trying to optimize processing speed, you're going to waste your time as a company because somebody's going to make it cheaper anyway. So keep wasting that resource in a non-wasteful way. But you can actually write code against it, which doesn't have to be as efficient, but you have to make sure that what's efficient is the way your device connects to the network. Because I was logged into the Wi-Fi in the hotel, it's pretty slow. So you've got to make sure your application and device are fast enough that they make up for the slowness of your network. So if you think about technology, there's very interesting things going on. We're turning into an open source world, i.e. people are going to be able to write applications, and those applications need to work on as many devices as possible. What's interesting is devices are becoming very, very powerful. And nobody knows the answer if I'm going to be carrying one device to read my books, another device to listen to my music, one device to take my pictures, one device is my phone. There will be some combination of various devices which will come out, and each of us will choose our preference. Maybe we like music and we like our phone. We'll carry a device which does both of those things. Some of us may like reading more, watching videos more. We may carry a different device. So device confluence is going to happen, but it will depend on how each of us choose to use that in what combination. If you look at the network side, what's fascinating is about 1994, so about 15 years ago, you were lucky if you could get a 19.2 kilobits per second connection to the internet. And those were days when if you clicked on a video file, you could pretty much expect your PC to crash. If you guys remember, there was times you clicked on a video and it just crashed. You couldn't do it. Even in your company, you were not allowed. If you did, the IT guy would show up and say, don't do that again, otherwise I'll take your computer away. So I don't have any use for it. It's just a glorified typewriter. Take it. Right? Those were the days 15 years ago. Today, there are cities in the United States. There are 2 cities in the United States where actually we have launched what we're going to do. We've announced we're going to do a 1 gigabit per second trial. A 1 gigabit per second trial, somebody can do the math. You were doing the math. You figured it out, and we'll talk about it at the end. But it's way faster. Very, very fast. In fact, what's funny story, somebody sent me an email so we've announced we're going to pick 2 cities in the United States where we're going to do this. People are changing the names of their cities to try and woo us to do it in their states. So Topeka, Kansas is now called Topeka, Google, Kansas for the month of March. They're trying to tell us, why didn't you come do the trial in our city? We'll rename our city to Google, which is very fascinating and flattering, but perhaps we may not choose them. We'll see. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's tremendous progress going on in network technology. So if you think about it, where does this technology lead us? Where this technology should lead us, hopefully, is we all carry our devices which can connect to anything at any point in time. And as that connectivity is enabled, we'll keep all of our information in the cloud somewhere. And we already do. For most of us who use email in our personal lives, our email's in the cloud. You know, actually, your email is not on your computer. It's not on your phone. It's out there in the cloud somewhere. Over time, your pictures are in the cloud. Most people who upload their pictures to Facebook, their pictures are in the cloud. Your videos are in the cloud. YouTube is in the cloud. It's not actually on your PC. So over time, as you see, slowly the applications are moving the information into the cloud. And as that begins to happen, you don't need as much computing power on your computer. You actually need a device that can connect very quickly to the cloud. And you need to make sure that the cloud exists wherever you go. I sit there and say, that sounds like science fiction.